Hello and welcome back to the Daily Express's Royal Roundup. This is the show where you get all of the latest royal news digested, gone over with a bit of expert opinion thrown in there. Lots of rumours swirling round. Well, we'll address those rumours actually backed up by any fact. So without further ado, let's introduce Daily Express's royal correspondent, Richard. Richard, hello, welcome.
Hello.
Obviously, it's a bit of a quieter period this time of year when it comes to the summers for the royals in terms of official engagements. But I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's nearly been a year since the Queen's passing. The world did quite literally stop in time for this monumental, well, I say event. I guess there were several events which went with this. It's the anniversary of the Queen's death. We've got some footage here. This is when she was on her descent from Balmoral, I think. There's some lovely archive footage there as well, I think, too, from the Jubilee. Lots of fabulous photos and videos that you'll be able to see of the Queen on today's episode, should I say, the late Queen. But we'll be discussing what will the royal family be doing to mark this today. Have you got any special events planned? Are you going to be spending your day a little bit differently? Some people have said that they'll be lighting a candle on that day on Twitter. What will you be doing? Pictures that have been coming forth this week as well of Harry doing a solo visit. He did a couple of speeches. We've got some footage from that. So quite a bit to talk about today. And we'll be reflecting on the new monarchy that we've had for the past, well, nearly a year. What have been the challenges and what have been some of the positives? Speaking to Richard about, is this what he expected it to be? So, Richard, let's kick things off then with the current story that is happening this week, which is Harry going solo without Meghan. They're very much doing the sort of their own things, it seems, at the moment, individual projects. Why has he gone solo?
Well, that's a good question. He's playing polo in Singapore on Saturday to raise money for Centre Barley, the African. Sorry, it sounds a bit crass the way I describe this, but I always describe it as the African AIDS Orphans Charity. It's a bit tabloidese, that, isn't it? Really, and even though I don't like using the word tabloid at all, but. So he was on his way to Singapore and went to Tokyo to attend a conference on sport run by ISPS Handa, which is also a sponsor of the polo tournament in Singapore, and helped him raise about £11 million from playing polo for Centre Barley. And it's run by a Japanese businessman, philanthropist, and also I didn't realise this until I was researching it for a story I wrote for today's paper. Yeah. A leader of a sect of Shintoism. So Dr. Haruhisa Handa. The spiritual leader of this particular religious sect, and is an advocate of interfaith tolerance and understanding. So he's been quite closely involved with Prince Harry for a while. So that's how he ended up in Japan, talking about the role that sport can play in helping to heal society. Why didn't Meghan go and the kids? A lot of travelling. I don't know. I mean, I think she's expected to join him in Germany next month for the
I think
games.
So.
And maybe that's enough.
I guess as well, if they were senior working members of the royal family, this would be their family time, right? So this would be the time where they would be spending with the children. I know they're not anymore, but I guess it is summer break. So I guess that would make sense. He did say in a speech, though, Richard, that he loves the country and he could even see himself living there, I think.
He did. He said, "You're warm." He praised the Japanese people for their warmth, compassion, generosity. Every single element of the Japanese culture is really unique and very, very special. Said he noticed it first 4 years ago when he went to the country for the Rugby World Cup. And he said, "And I would happily live here if you'd have me." And that really was, I think, the quote that most of the papers picked up. Yeah.
Would there be any truth in that, do you think, Richard, in terms of actually, like, seriously moving there? Like,
my guess is he was being polite.
Yes.
But, it's interesting, isn't it? And, of course, it's come after there's been quite a lot of speculation, which, there doesn't seem to be much evidence to support it, that, they're distanced in their relationship, he and Meghan. But, instead, we saw them out on a date night just before her 42nd birthday.
Now, some people have said about that date night that it was very evidently sort of like a PR stunt, kind of, let's come across like the happy couple, because they're so incredibly private. Surely they would have known that there were going to be photographers there at quite a public place.
Well, I suppose that allegation is always levelled at them. Levelled at Kate, actually, as well. Quite often. I mean, there's a lot of confusion over on social media as well about when we sort of write about making a surprise appearance, because what we mean by that is, when William or Kate make a surprise appearance with their children or whatever, what it usually means is the royal press corps has been told in advance, but it's not been made public before. And, people always say, "Oh, surprise appearance, how come all the cameras were there? That's convenient." Anyway, none of that was the case this time. Harry was in Japan, and partly because I think it's a quiet news period. Yeah, it's made a bit in the newspapers today. And but what has also made bigger, and it's really funny how these things happen, is that he and Meghan have finally lost their HRH on the royal website, and this appears to have come about because our colleague Emily Ferguson, the Express's digital royal editor, wrote a big piece both for the paper and for the website last weekend, noting that the royal website just hadn't been updated properly, and there were all sorts of inaccuracies, things out of date on it. And one of the things was that Harry and Meghan were still referred to as their Royal Highnesses, and as we know, the Queen. I think a lot of papers say, sort of in journalistic shorthand, stripped them of the title. It's not quite true, because they're not. Same with Prince Andrew. They just asked not to use the title. Sorry, I've said title. I was going to say, to make a pedantic point. I mean, I think every single newspaper this morning has talked about their HRH titles, and strictly speaking, and
I think we've lost Richard. No, he's come back. Richard, you've come back.
All right. Yes, I was going to say that, strictly speaking, Duke and Duchess of Sussex are their titles, and HRH is what's taught, is how they're styled, and so they're not supposed to use those styles. So that's made more in the papers today. But interestingly, it was funny how these things work. It was actually on our website first, I think, and then on other websites sort of 24 hours before it actually appeared in the papers. It sort of took off as a print story yesterday.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do you think this would be affecting them in any way, shape, or shape or form, Richard? Do you really think that they're going to be that bothered about having this, removed from the website?
No, probably not. They were forced to suck it up a long time ago, and I mean, it is interesting that they still use those the titles they've got, Duke and Duchess, and
they still sign
want their kids to be prince and princesses, even though they've levelled so many accusations at the monarchy as an institution. But that, there we are.
Yeah, it is what it is, I suppose. Harry seems to be juggling a lot of plates at the moment. They seem to have a lot of different projects going on. It was only a couple of weeks ago where they had the virtual video. He's now in Japan. Then they've got the Invictus Games. Despite the fact that they've stepped back from royal life, it hasn't stopped them from being busy.
No, I mean, somebody was just asking there what's wrong with him going on his own. You've got to think about the children. I think that's a fair point. I think members of the royal family, the working ones, the senior ones, they go on. Some of them go on individual overseas trips. Some of them together. Very rarely the whole family goes. So,
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I forgot what you were asking now.
No, so I was just saying that it's not stopped them when they've stepped back from being senior royals. It's not stopped them from having a really busy schedule and pushing, I guess, their own projects and with that, their own agenda.
Yeah, I mean, there was a very quiet period when we really didn't hear much from them, and clearly they've had a bit of a setback with the losing the Spotify gig and all the money that went with that. But we have heard that they are involved they're involved in a project to do a sort of film version of a Canadian journalist book, and various other projects seem to be in the fore. So it does look as if they're carrying on with Netflix, and Netflix is supporting them, because I think Netflix might have bought the rights to that book. So
that would be in the millions, Richard.
Yeah, well, the reported figure was £3 million, and that's not been confirmed on the record by anybody.
But of course, they've got huge living expenses that they need to balance as well, don't they?
They have, yes, they do have.
So there we go. Okay, that's all the latest then on Harry in Tokyo, and I'm sure we'll be seeing lots of Harry and Meghan at the Invictus Games. Can we expect to see the children there, Richard?
I wouldn't be surprised if they all went as a family, but it remains to be seen yet.
Yeah, it remains to be seen. They obviously, they say they want to keep their family life quite private, so we'll see. Let's have a look at the poll then. I think we've got a poll on this subject, if we can bring it up. And if you do have any questions on this, then do pop them in the comments section below. Whilst we bring that up, we're going to move on to the anniversary of the late Queen's death. We did talk about this last week, Richard, in terms of briefly what we can expect. Apparently it's going to be quite private, not mass events that we saw on her actual passing, a period of mourning and grief. But what insight do you now have? We're a week closer. We're just under a month away now.
Yes. It was a couple of weeks ago, wasn't it, actually, because you were away last week. And
yes, it was. I'm pleased that you're keeping eyes on the time, because I'm apparently not.
And I was speculating that, I thought there might be some sort of event at Balmoral to mark the anniversary. In fact, it appears that there is nothing planned. There are no public engagements for the King and Queen planned for that entire week around the September the 8th anniversary, as far as we've been told. And the family, we understand, also is not going to be marking the anniversary privately at Balmoral with any sort of collective ceremony. Set against that, Prince and Princess of Wales, William and Kate, have made it clear that they do intend to say something. You know, I imagine it would be Prince William, something to honour her legacy on the anniversary and to look forward, I think. But the Kensington Palace doesn't really seem to be quite clear at the moment what that will entail and what, you know, whether it'll be just a statement on social media, a video recording, something done in public outside. So we wait to see. But it sounds as if that is going to be the main way that the family record the first anniversary.
I mean, that is a total change to what we saw a year ago on her actual passing. I mean, the images that we were seeing, the coverage, it was quite literally everywhere you went. I mean, you couldn't avoid it if you followed the royal family or not. It was everywhere. You were driving in your car and you'd see a picture of the Queen at the paper. You turn on the TV, whatever you were doing, you could not avoid it. People were all talking about it. So I suppose the question is, why isn't there anything?
Well, it is an interesting question, and I think first of all you have to remember that it's somebody. It's the anniversary of the king losing his mother, and I think he would see it as a continuation of the way that Queen Elizabeth II used to mark her accession day on February the 6th each year, which generally speaking, she marked privately. She was always at Sandringham on that anniversary, and generally wouldn't be seen in public. If I remember rightly, the vicar from Sandringham Parish Church would come to Sandringham House, and there'd be prayers at Sandringham for her privately. And I think the king sees himself as continuing that tradition, but also I think you have to see it in terms of the monarchy as an institution, and down the decades, it has been a bittersweet day because there have obviously been times when Queen Elizabeth II was celebrating 70 years on the throne, 60 years on the throne, etc., going back, and the start of important jubilee years on some of those occasions, and it was seen as a cause for celebration. But of course, for her, it was also a day when she was just thinking about mourning her father still. I have to say that although royal sources have sort of stressed that, made the comparison with how she used to do it, there was, in my experience, at least one occasion when she did come out in public, and that was on the 60th anniversary of her accession. And I was at Sandringham in 2012 when she actually came out. She went into King's Lynn, met the sort of town council there, the council.
Right, okay.
And then went to an infant and nursery school at Dersingham, a village very near Sandringham, and toured the school. And so it wasn't always the case that she never came out in public on that day. But I think if you go back to September the 8th last year and the 10 or 11 days, 12 days that followed that, one of the interesting things, and obviously as a royal correspondent, I knew what the plans roughly were for what would happen when she died, and it was as much about introducing the new king to the public
Yeah.
around the UK, as it was about mourning the loss of this woman who served us for 70 years as sovereign. So it's always a delicate balance for the institution, and I haven't. This is just my gut feeling, but I suspect that they want to move on. You know, they want to.
Yeah, and we'll talk about
the reign now, the new king, rather than keep harping back to.
Yes, yes, and then of course comparisons will be made.
Yes,
the king now and the late queen, and we do know that the late queen was very, very, very popular. With many generations. So yes, I can see why perhaps they'd want to move on. And of course, as you said, it's a private grieving. Of course, the first display of grief had to be on such a public stage. So yes, but I do imagine, this is just me guessing here, Richard, that there will be flowers put at some of the gates, I imagine, from the public.
Yes, you're probably right. Yes.
Yeah, maybe. But that's just my prediction. But if you're going to be spending the day doing something slightly differently or having a moment of reflection, I'm sure it will be, across the papers and it'll be across the news, people reflecting on her life. We've got a poll that we did ask you guys about if you will be marking the day at all. Will you be marking the Queen's passing? Yes, 60%. No, 40%. So there you are. It's been a year, and I'd be very interested to see if we even did this poll 6 months ago and closer to the time to see the difference. But I suppose time sort of fades memories slightly, doesn't it?
Well, for me, it's been a whirlwind year. I mean, it's surprising it's come around so quickly, and it's been an interesting first 12 months of the new reign. We've seen some subtle changes. There's always a focus on continuity. The British monarchy's mission statement is to provide a sense of continuity and stability in the country. But we've also seen some differences. The King's new reign, there's been probably greater focus on religious and cultural tolerance, and
absolutely,
at the legacy of empire, etc., slavery. The king is very keen to, I think, meet those, to tackle those issues reasonably head on, whereas perhaps his mother was perhaps not quite so keen.
And he's also had to play a bit of a balancing act with personal family drama as well. How much does he actually talk about it? How does he move on from it when every single move that he makes and every single comment that he makes, even his body language, is completely gone over with a fine tooth comb as well? And he did have to see, obviously, his mother having to deal with that, because it's been happening for a few years now. But of course, not only Harry and Meghan, but Prince Andrew as well. He's had to deal with that too.
He has, yes. That looked like pictures from Sandringham Flower Show.
I think it was. And of course,
and there are lots of issues. The Prince Andrew issue is outstanding. Obviously, the family trauma, the family rift has not been fixed.
No.
So there are a lot of personal issues to deal with.
But in a way, quite bittersweet. He's always wanted the public to love Camilla. He's always wanted that to happen, and I suppose he has got what he has wanted.
Yes, he has. He has. I mean, and I think that really is down to the late Queen, that sort of masterful stroke in declaring at the start of her 70th year on the throne that it was her desire that Camilla should be known as Queen, and that really cleared the path, in the same way that when she said something very similar about then Prince Charles becoming the next head of the Commonwealth after her, that was enough to clear the way for it. So,
yes.
where really it was up to the individual Commonwealth nations to vote on it. They could have put any candidate up to be head of the Commonwealth.
And he also has to deal with a very, very different world to that of his mother. The rise of social media, people's opinions very much changing on the monarchy, and trying to capture a younger audience as well at the same time.
Yes.
You did mention there briefly about understanding, the cultural differences that we now live in. He's actually talking about it, which is good news. But he's still got quite a long way to go. It's only been a year, and there are 100% definitely people who might think in the younger generation, actually, what is the point of having a royal family? Because there are lots of people in the younger generation who do think that.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. When I was looking yesterday at Harry in Japan, I was sort of thinking, well, why might he think it nice to live in Japan? Well, it's another monarchy, and famously, the Japanese emperor, the Shinto religion regarded the Japanese emperor as directly descended from the sun goddess. I think they sort of veered away from the idea that the emperor himself was a god, but so the emperor has traditionally been revered in Japan. But interestingly, in Japan as well, young people are expressing increasing skepticism about the monarchy there. So, it might not be much better over there.
The grass might not always be greener on the other side.
For an exiled member of a royal family. But you're right. Russell Myers and I took part in a debate at the at WOMAD Festival the other weekend on whether the monarchy had a future in the UK, and I think we were rather dismayed to find that the meeting was absolutely packed with people wearing Republic T-shirts.
Wow.
So it was a difficult crowd, but an really interesting debate. And clearly, Republic, this anti-monarchy group that wants to replace the king with an elected president, feels that it has more scope to persuade public opinion for its case in the new reign. I think that it was acknowledged by many of its supporters. I think that. As much as they didn't like the fact we were a monarchy under Elizabeth II, she was extremely popular, and it was a very difficult task.
So, would you say
there were still 60-odd, around about 60% of the public who are in favour of the monarchy, and around about 25% who say they're not, and then the rest who really aren't that bothered anyway.
So, would you say that was the biggest challenge then that he faces, the king faces? Is the rise of sort of anti-monarchy Republican movement?
Well, I think it's still got a long, long way to go before many politicians will be persuaded that the public actually wants to see a change. So, in that sense, I think he's fine, and I think he's doing the top job his way.
Yeah, and I also to think about the government at the moment, I'm not sure how many people would be wanting to giving them more power. I don't know that. I'm not sure about that.
Well, we always say that it's always the strongest argument is what would you replace it with, or who would you replace it with?
Yeah.
And interestingly, there was a Gallup poll. Yes, I think it was published yesterday. Asking Americans who they would like to see as head of state if they didn't have an elected president, and Prince William, I think, was a very popular choice. So, we, I personally have lots of, have family living who are American, and lots of friends over there. And there's always an ambivalent attitude, I think, from Americans. A lot of them are very interested in the British monarchy, but also sort of sometimes seem to think it's a slightly weird institution. But equally, I think a lot of them would say that they're their society is broken at the moment. They're kind of, they're a very divided nation, and it's not going to happen, but maybe a ceremonial head of state rather than an executive head of state, might be a system that would work there.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, what is the biggest positive that you think's happened this year in the new monarchy, start of a new reign?
Personally, I think the King's determination to try to bring different communities together and to heal some of the divisions that have arisen, partly because of his own family situation. I have to say, the whole sort of family rift really did divide Britain as it divided people around the world, and
it still does divide people. I mean,
it does, yes, yeah. But I think he's trying to celebrate that Windrush generation, the people who came over from the Caribbean, from 1948, and I think there will be more to come on Britain's legacy of slavery in the empire, and it's a tricky situation. The Dutch monarchy has been tackling it head on as well, and my personal view, I read history at university, and I just think the more we know about our own history, the better we are to progress.
Yeah.
Really. So just get it out in the open. And personally, slightly digressing here, but I'm not in favour of toppling statues in general, and I'm more in favour of explaining who these people were and what they did. And
but do you think he's explaining enough, Richard? Because some people might say he's picking and choosing what he decides to explain.
Well, I think there are tricky areas there. I mean, the royal family is facing particular criticism because previous monarchs, going back to Elizabeth I, were directly involved in the slave trade and made a lot of money out of it. And then there is also the sort of national interest. Britain is under pressure, as are some other developed countries, to pay reparations to some Caribbean countries in particular and some African countries. That's a matter for government, really. So he can't be drawn too much into that debate. So it's always a difficult area for him, I think.
Yes, I think it must be. Okay, looking on then past this anniversary, can we expect more of the same, or can we expect a bit of a shift in terms of being a bit more confident, perhaps being a bit more vocal? What can we expect of the King and the Queen?
Well, I think he on that particular issue, or just generally.
Generally.
Oh, just generally. Well, it's an interesting question. I think he's pretty much set his course now. It's clear that he still feels very strongly about issues like climate change and other environmental issues that he's campaigned about as Prince of Wales for a very long time. But he does feel more restricted in what he can say publicly about those issues. But there are others in the family who are stepping up to say more about that. So
yeah,
William in particular.
Yeah, and that's very much his wish, isn't it? He wanted to give when he stepped up to be the Prince of Wales. He definitely did want to hand that over, as it were. And I suppose who better to do it than his own son? So it's reliable. Okay, then, Richard. Thank you. Thank you for today. As we've both said, it's a bit of a quieter period over the royal family in terms of events. But as ever, we are carrying on with the Royal Roundup every week. As Richard said, and he remembered more than I can. I was off on holiday last week. It doesn't feel like that when you're sat in an office now, but that's why we were off last week. But hopefully we'll be back next week.
I will be away. I will be away for a couple of weeks, actually.
Oh, is that next week, Richard?
Not next week, no.
No, not next week. Okay, fine. So we're definitely on next week, and then me and Richard will go over diaries and check for the following weeks. But of course, we premiere on YouTube on Fridays at 4 p.m. Quite a few of you watched that a couple of weeks ago, I think. So keep that playlist going. We've also got our playlist on Facebook, and we'll be talking about hopefully some new platforms soon. Here's hoping that you can listen to us on. So, Richard, thank you so much. And we will catch each other next week with the latest Raw news.
Thanks, Patrick.